Hi, I'm Arlen Peoples with the Illinois Principals Association, and today we're sitting down with Gary Tipsord, Superintendent of Leroy School District, to talk about the evidence-based funding model. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Arlen, thanks for having me.
You bet. So tell me, Gary, why was the funding model changed? What was wrong with the old model, and what are the benefits of the new?
A lot of people had talked about the fact that, we just had an old model for a long time. That really wasn't the reason. The reason was, as accountability became more important, we really needed a model that was designed to deliver resources so people could deliver education to the students they actually had to serve. And the model that existed before, it delivered resources, but it wasn't specific to the need of teachers in classrooms. And this model actually begins to look at that. It looks at the unique set of students that we've got to serve on a daily basis and the research-based elements that are important to those students and an opportunity to improve teaching and learning as a result.
That's fantastic. And what are some of the benefits that jump out at you right away of this new model?
I think one of the biggest things is that it looks at our unique students. So, with the diversity that we have in Illinois, we've got so many different types of schools that serve so many different students. And what this model actually now does is it looks at every school uniquely, both in terms of the students that they have to serve and the resources that they have available to them. It's amazing when you think about the diversity of this state. To try and fit them all into one funding box was really unrealistic. And that diversity has only continued to grow. So within this model, we can now actually look at the uniqueness of every district and create a delivery model for funding that meets that demand. The key and the most critical aspect of this is the adequacy target. And I think one of the critical elements here, and I think every district in the state of Illinois has to do this first. Once you know what your adequacy target is, we have to answer this question first. Is that adequacy target sufficient to meet the demand of the communities that we serve? It's possible that in many districts that adequacy target may be more than what we would expect to be able to use to educate our students. So that first question is critical. No matter what else we talk about, we have to answer that question. We have to contemplate that, have real conversations with our boards, with our administrative teams, with the people around us about delivering what we believe to be an adequate education.
And what about base funding minimum? What does that mean? How is it calculated?
Yeah, so the easiest way to think about base funding minimum is what did the state pay us last year for services that are now embedded within the model? And so you have a lot of superintendents and business officials across the state that have gone into their FRIS summaries and taken a look at their general state aid, their special education services. Remember that transportation exists outside the model. Low incident, high cost special education exists outside the model. But for the most part, the balance of those services related to special education, bilingual funding, general state aid, when you take those that used to be mandated categoricals and collapse them into one fund, that becomes our base funding minimum. And the significant component of that is this. That becomes the guarantee that nobody goes backwards. That means that we all get to start from a flat level and grow toward adequacy from there. So even if I'm a Tier 4 district and not getting a lot of money, I know that I'm not going backwards, that the state is going to continue to support me as they supported me in the past.
Okay, terrific. And what about local capacity target?
Yeah, so you talk about demystifying things. Mm-hmm. Local capacity target is probably the most difficult to demystify, but the simplest way to think of it is what do we have the ability to do locally to contribute toward our adequacy target? And the model looks at, from just a true database look at it, not relative to taxation or anything else, but looks at every district relative to one another. And what do we have in terms of relative capacity? And that becomes a calculated number. And then we obviously have our real number. It is what is our tax rate, less a couple of variables, but what does our tax rate drive toward our ability to fund? And so you have this calculation around a relative number relative to all districts in the state, and you have a real number, what we're actually able to deliver. Here's how they're distributed. Tier 4 is the easiest one to identify. Tier 4 districts are those that are at 100% of adequacy or beyond. Your Tier 3 schools are those that are between 90 and 100%. Now remember, if the assumption is that we're going to lay 10% of federal money on top, and whilst many Tier 3 districts may not get that much in federal money, the assumption is that at 90% with 10% laid on top, we're pretty much at the adequacy target that we're hoping for. Between 64% and 90% are your Tier 2 districts. Tier 1's target is 64%. So all districts that are at 64% of adequacy or below fall into Tier 1, high priority districts.
If there was anything that you would want to help people understand about this new model, like one thing that maybe is getting confused out there as people go around the state talking about it, what would that one thing be about the new model?
There are different things important in different parts of the state and different types of districts. In some of our most affluent districts, they're having to deal with the fact that they're over 100%. And so what does that mean? What does that mean to my district? What does that mean to my community? And so if I could answer it this way, it would be this. Districts need to understand the context of the model well enough to develop a narrative that makes it understandable to the people that they represent. And I think developing the ability around articulating the meaning behind the model, which is not simple, is going to be some really good work by leaders around the state.
All right, Gary. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. To get to the full course on Ed Leaders Network, you can click the link in the description, and that will take you to the Evidence-Based Funding Model course on edleadersnetwork.org. Take care.